Hello, Pradeepa. Welcome so much to the Miracles Happen Fertility podcast.
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be in the conversation with you today.
Oh, and I am so delighted that you agreed, because this topic is near and dear to me and a lot of people right now. We're talking about cultural norms and things, especially related to the fertility world, but obviously in the global world right now, I am certainly becoming more aware of my own internal things, processes, but I obviously want to keep this also within the fertility context, because just when I thought that the fertility community couldn't get more nuanced, there's always more nuance. So, but before we get into all that detail, if you can, just give us a little mini bio of sorts. Like, who are you? What do you do in the fertility community? And yeah, tell us all about that.
So, yes, I came into fertility community. Let me backtrack a little bit. So I have gone through infertility journey for 12 years. So, that puts me in the community default, right? Like, I'm part of the community either way. But from there on, we kind of ended our journey. It's a long and painful journey for me, but then at the end of our journey, my husband and I, we decided to go into the adoption route, and it took a few more years for us. But after 16 years of marriage, our infertility journey ended with adopting our son, Kartik. So he came into our lives in 2016. So I kind of got promoted from being a fertility what should I say, going through the journey to becoming a mom, like literally in an instant.
You and I know that story well.
Yes.
I should say this for folks who don't know how we connected. I saw your TED Talk on a Facebook forum where fertility people hang out, fertility providers hang out, and I was crying because I'm like, that's my story. It's just so beautiful. And we will be linking that on the show notes for people so that they can watch it too. It's a beautiful story. And you only scratch the surface, and then you talk about, these ideas for people in your coaching practice for moving through the journey.
So that's, being on the journey for that long gives you perspectives and gives you opportunities to learn so much about myself. Like, yes, there were nuances, like, but I learned so much about myself, who I was as a person, how my journey affected me and changed me as a person, right? And just jumping ahead from that, becoming a mom, like literally in an instant, became a mom for close to a 4-year-old. When Kartik came home, he was 3 3/4. So he was close to being 4 years old. That literally changed my life in a second, because leading a life for 16 years as just married couples, and we had our ways of living. Sometimes it may not be just appropriate or ideal, but then suddenly we welcome a 4-year-old into a home, and you have to make shifts quite drastically in a short time. You cannot continue to watch TV until like 2 a.m. and eat out whenever you like, and things like that. Some of those things, like those were some big shifts that at least I saw coming into our lives. But then that was just a beautiful, wonderful experience. And I would say it changed me as a person after that. When Kartik came into picture, it changed me as a person. But then I think in our previous conversation, Maria, I mentioned that coaching is not new to me. I've been coaching in the corporate world for 10 plus years now. But then when Kartik came home, I had the option. Like I was quite desperate wanting a family and becoming a mom for 16 years. That's just a long time. But then Kartik came and I had that, right? Yes, I had the family that I wanted, and I'm a mother now. I could have just moved on with my life. But then what I realized was for a split second, I stopped for a second and thought, like, I wanted to look back into my journey. Um, I could have just moved on and lived a life like anybody else. But then that's when it really hit me. Yes, I became a mom now. Yes, I have a family. Yes, I have a loving boy that I just wanted to give all my love that I have been like, holding for such a long time. That's all great. But I don't want it to ignore what happened to me and my journey per se, right? That was the moment that I stopped and I thought, like, okay, what would it be like if if Pradeepa had another Pradeepa coach back then?
Mm.
What would her life be? Somehow that hit me only when Karthik came home. I
Mhm.
have no idea because even though I was a coach in the corporate space, I never knew about, working with a coach for myself back then. I was not privy to that, to be honest, right? So that was the time I realized what would it be like if Pradeepa back then had another Pradeepa to work with her, to be her coach, right? To help her go forward, to offer her a safe space to be herself. And that's when I realized, wow, that was a gap, because even some of my doctors knew some of the challenges that I was going through, and nobody has recommended me anything like that. The best they could recommend was once I was recommended going to a therapy.
Mhm.
Nothing against my therapist, wonderful person, loving person. I personally, back then, with everything that was going on in my struggles and in my journey, I just couldn't connect to them at that time, because my therapist did not go through anything to the extent what I have gone through. In fact, they have never experienced infertility in their life.
Right.
So in my mind, I just couldn't. I was thinking, you have no idea what I'm going through, and I was, in fact, to be super honest with you, I was a little bit sour,
That's right.
right? So that relationship did not work for me because I was not open, because I was not. In my mind, I had this bias as to, like, you don't understand me, you haven't gone through this, so how can you help me, right? That was the perspective. So I was not being open for that at that time. And that's when I realized, man, now how can I become somebody who can support that? Not trying to say I'm special, but I walked the walk for
Oh,
a
yes,
long
you are.
time.
Yes, you are special.
I have walked the walk for such a long time. That means, I understand, I empathize. Our stories may not be the same. You and I shared our mutual stories with each other the other day. It may not be exactly the same, but guess what? There are parts of the story, there are parts of our life that we can totally relate with each other, right? And that's exactly what I wanted to, create for other people, right? I want to create a space, I want to create a place that was missing for me back then, where people can be themselves, right? People can feel whatever they wanted to feel, people can express however they want to express it. And at the end, it's not just like, a talking session, it's not just somebody who can come, but rather, I can help them find a new light that they are not seeing yet.
Yes.
So that's exactly why I started, even though I'm a life coach, I decided to segregate a part of my time and specialize in coaching people going through fertility challenges,
Yes.
because I know there is light, but
Mhm.
I can also feel people often walk in darkness thinking that there is no light. And
That's
my
right.
motivation is to help them show that light.
Yes. And there's something about having experienced it yourself that helps folks understand there
Yeah,
there is light. There is
Yes,
light. You just tune
absolutely. Yes.
into it. Yeah.
Our stories may not be the same. Our outcomes may not be the same. Our journey may not be the same. We may not be the same person, but what we were going through, the emotions, the pains, the feelings, the desires, the dreams, the fears, the deep, dark secrets, the challenges, the frustrations, right? The shame, the jealousies, which are often not talked about, they are the same.
Yeah. They are the same, and therefore you can connect. It's interesting, though, I should say that, you know, as a therapist, having sought therapy myself during the fertility journey, they're human too, right? They experience darkness, they experience the heaviness, but there's something about the fertility world, just like a small comment, like, I remember the second therapist try I walked into his office and he knew that I was a therapist and he always called me counselor. And that was so grating on my nerves because I was there to not be a counselor. I didn't want to be the one to have the answers. And he said something that was so triggering. I just look at my wife and she gets pregnant. Right. So there's a fear when you connect with a professional like yourself or a therapist of them saying something like this, which it just enhances the bitterness and the fear that it's going to happen again. And you want to be able to create that safety like it sounds like you do with your clients. So
Absolutely.
so wonderful.
Yeah, I typically don't give any advice to my clients, right? I help them see the light for themselves. I help them see a different perspective. And many times I just, use my hand as think about this as a mirror, show the mirror back to them.
Yes.
That they are not seeing yet or they are not willing to see yet, right? So yeah, absolutely. Because who am I to tell them what to do? Because I trust in their own wisdom.
That's right.
Yes, I trust in their own. Everybody has our own wisdom. And many times we think that we need to seek external guidance and we need to seek external entities to tell us what we need to do. But um, how can we turn it around and listen to our own instinct and wisdom, and take our guidance from there, right? Like that's exactly what I always tell my clients, do I have some ideas for you? Yes, absolutely. But your wisdom, your innate wisdom always, always, always trumps my good ideas.
You bet. You bet. Beautiful. I tell people too, my job is to work myself out of a job because you can do this.
Yes.
You don't need an external person, right? So,
Absolutely.
we're so in line, you and me. We're in line. So to niche down even further, being able to connect with somebody who's gone through the journey, no matter how it turns out, and it could be choosing to live without children or ending the treatments, not pursuing adoption and living child-free. It doesn't really matter because all those emotions are the same. However, I do want to niche down even more to this notion of culture. And my listeners know, my viewers know that I am really deep into the mud and the weeds here on examining my own white privilege. And I know this is a rather heavy topic, but so is fertility stuff. So let's get heavy and come out with some hope on the other side here. I am curious because I can't speak from someone of your culture. I can't speak from your experience. And I know obviously we're only talking about your specific experience, but I bet that it resonates with other people.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, when you think about your own culture, your own upbringing, your own, relationships, and your own, spiritual affiliations or anything related to your culture and growing up, how do you feel the fertility journey relates to that? Was it more difficult? Was it more trying? Was it easier? I'm trying to learn myself.
Yeah.
So if you can just riff on that for a little while.
Yeah,
Let me
absolutely.
hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So for your listeners, if they're not familiar, so I come from India. I'm originally from India, more so specific from south of India. And yes, there is a big cultural impact when it comes to infertility. It's such a just to be super honest with you, Maria, growing up, um, I was not personally privy to the word infertility.
Oh, wow.
I was not, because call me naive. However, there's nobody around me in my family. I never knew anybody was going through infertility, um, or people talk about that subject in general. Um, Nor I have heard about it in any other public forums, um, like other topics. Knowing that it's a medical condition, I knew about heart diseases, I knew about other health conditions, I knew about cancer, all those other diseases. But if you talk purely from the scientific aspect of infertility being a disease, I've never heard about that. So that's how I grew up in India. And when I got married, when I came here to the United States in 2000, um, first few years I wasn't, we were just trying and it wasn't happening. No big deal. But then when I got pregnant for the first time in 2005 and I end up losing the child, miscarriage, that's when that's when we went back to our OBGYN and started exploring, like, hey, what's happening? Is this natural? Are there any things that we need to be concerned about? So that's when I started hearing about, may not be with my first miscarriage, but I had two other miscarriages. I had three miscarriages in total. At the end of that, my OBGYN was scratching her head as to like what's going on with her. Maybe you should talk to a fertility specialist.
Mm.
That's when I heard it for the first time. Like there is a specialist for treating this,
Wow.
and it was I was excited, and
Mhm.
also like it was quite eye opening for me, to be honest with you, right? I don't know a lot of things growing up. I always believe like, there's so much to learn in the world and we are not going to be privy to everything growing up. But to me, until I started getting to go into into this journey myself, and started looking at and started learning about how many people are affected by this. One in three women has a miscarriage in her life, if she's sexually active, and one in eight couples go through infertility in their lifetime, which was a startling number in general, which I did not realize nor recognize until it really personally hit me. And, you know, in India, it's a very taboo subject, right? People don't talk about it. It's a it's a you can consider it's a shameful subject to bring up because it talks about a woman's ability. Let's ignore men for a second here. It talks about a woman's ability to fulfill her duties as a woman. In this case, it's reproducing and giving a child to the world, and that's a sacred part. And oftentimes back in India, even hearing and listening and talk. So for my TEDx talk, before I gave the talk, I actually gave the talk in New Delhi, India, and I did some research, blind research with a lot of different people in India about their thoughts to infertility. What are they thinking as the causes, just to get a perspective.
Wow.
And a lot of people in India, especially in a little older generation, believes that infertility is mostly women. It happens only in women,
Okay.
and men are not responsible for that, right?
Wow.
So there is a misunderstanding about the medical aspect of it. And also, even if the men has infertility in, in a relationship, oftentimes certain, in certain areas of the country, women are to be blamed for that,
Wow.
right? So I'm not talking about this is, like there are a bigger amount of population in India where still the literacy about infertility needs to happen,
Yeah.
still needs to be, a lot more people need to be educated about the medical aspects of it and what are the causes and how it affects both men and women equally, things like that. So there is belief system in there where it's a women's problem. If not, even if it's the men's problem, it's because of the women, the men is having the problem, something like that.
Wow.
So so there is a strong cultural belief like that. But for me personally, neither of my family nor my husband's family, we came from a very, fortunate, well-educated background. All our parents and our siblings. So we didn't have that kind of challenge or pressure. But India being a biggest country with ton of population, there is a quite big amount of population that believes that infertility is, it's as if it's like you did something bad in your life before, in your previous life, that's coming to haunt you like this in this life. So to a degree, let me tell you why I'm saying this, because at some point in my own journey, I used to think from that perspective, what did I do wrong
Mhm.
that it is coming to haunt me like this?
Yep.
Right? Like, God, I do believe in spiritual power higher than me. God, what did I do wrong? Why are you punishing me like this?
Mhm.
So there is a small aspect of that, even though, if you talk about intellectually, I don't believe that. But somehow, somewhere, with all the frustrations and when all these failures that's happening, and I was desperately trying to seek some answer. So when I fall into that victim mode, I go back to like trying to blame somebody for something, and I end up blaming God at that time, at one point in time in my journey.
Mhm.
So to wrap it up from the cultural aspect, it has a bigger impact on people. Now,
Yes.
it's your own belief first comes, but then you're also surrounded by people with variety of belief systems about this topic.
Hmm.
And whether we like it or not, when we hear all those different things, some of these things we just take it in, and
Right.
it kind of goes inside ourselves and houses inside ourselves. Um, and if you're not careful enough, if you're not carefully filtering them out, hey, this is not useful, if this is somebody else's belief, guess what, Maria, it starts to affect us too.
Hmm. Yeah, physically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you were fortunate enough to have been with, or to have been associated with your spouse's family, and then your own family. You said that you were fortunate enough that these shameful messages or things didn't come to you. Do you find though that other folks who grew up in India or who have Indian family do have to experience a level of shame or indignity, or do people just not say a word and they pity them? Or I'm just kind of wondering
Yeah,
what it's like or what you can speak to around that.
yeah, it can range from people to people. I'll I'll go back to the example when I was doing this blind survey. There
Yeah.
was this one person responded with just such a long post back to this question, where they actually talked about their experience going through fertility. I did not know they had fertility. It was a blind survey. So they grew up in a very small village in the northern part of India. And one of the big challenges for them, not having a child or not able to reproduce a child, they were constantly being questioned by the elderly in the household and constantly being blamed for not able to get pregnant or stay pregnant, right? And that really led them to have such a, you know, uh, such a pressure, actually such a pressure to be not able to live a peaceful life, not have a good support system if they don't have it, and constantly being asked this question, constantly being blamed, constantly being blamed for getting periods. Yeah, you lost this opportunity, guess what, like, you have your periods, it's not going to happen again, right? So sometimes they said that, like, even I have to hide, sometimes when I have my periods. This was an extreme case that I'm talking about, and I'm sure that voice is not a unique voice. That's not a singled out voice. In places where this education is not there, in families in India, this may happen in multiple levels. But I
Mhm.
also talk about, right, like, think about how it affects. I have many clients who are from Indian origin too,
Mhm.
and a couple of things that I've heard is even a casual ask by the parents, right, or casual sayings by the parents can deeply affect
Yes,
how you take it,
that's
right?
what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, can
Okay.
deeply affect how somebody is taking it.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be a direct, yeah, I'm going to be challenging your fertility. It doesn't have to be mean or direct like that. Just even a concerned question from a parent, or a curious question from an aunt or an uncle, or a deep desire from the grandma or grandpa who's really getting old, wanting to see their grandchild before they die, right? Any of these requests, if you start internalizing it, that puts on additional pressure,
Yeah.
right? Like, without even you realizing it, that you're taking in that much pressure. And that can cause so much of stress to go along with that.
Yeah. And you're US based, right?
Yeah, I am in Dallas, yes.
Okay. And your clients then, when you speak of them, they are also in the US, or are they all over the world?
Hello?
There you are.
Yep, sorry.
No worries. I don't know if you heard my question. I asked if your clients are US based as well. Are they all over?
Yes, majority of my clients are US and Canada based.
Okay. And so even living in the US or Canada, there's this difficulty when a parent asks, even lovingly, or a grandparent asks, okay, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I wouldn't even segregate that just for my Asian clients.
Hmm.
This happens to, even like, I have a lot of American, like,
Sure.
people who are born here. They also face something similar,
Yes, yes.
right?
Do you mean outside of the Asian culture?
Yeah. People who are born
Caucasian?
here,
Oh, yeah.
American, white people, right? Like, they have similar experiences as well when it comes to building families,
Yes, yes. Yeah,
right?
indeed.
So to come to think about that, me working with very global set of clients, I realized that it's, yes, there is an aspect of culture to it, but that kind of expectation on building a family and having a child after after a certain point in life, maybe it's universal,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That
That
expectation is universal.
Yeah, I remember having that myself. But for those who don't know, I don't know that I've talked about this a lot, but my mom's side of the family is Hispanic, and it really is this this idea that women are obligated to know how to cook well and clean well and procreate and be excellent moms. Now, my family also added in that women needed to support, and that means even financially, so go out and get a job. So you had to be everything.
Yeah.
And so when my mom would ask about, having a baby, in fact, it was very interesting. My mom is very like old school, but she said to me when my husband and I were engaged, you should just have a baby now. Everybody's doing it. I went, okay. Because she wanted a grandchild, and it had to be a granddaughter because she had a lot of grandsons. She wanted a granddaughter, and there was pressure. Why don't you do this now? Do this now.
Right.
So, yeah, and I definitely have white privilege, but there was even that little bit of cultural stuff for me, extra stuff in there for me too. But yeah, so some of what you're talking about though is I know that it can resonate with so many others. And I feel like there's something that you said that I'm like, oh my gosh, just a small little question can be so triggering. And I feel like, especially for folks where there is so much shame tied to, pregnancy loss and getting one's period, even if you live in a Western-based, like the US or Canada or wherever, there's this cultural like ingraining that happens, right? Like I feel like it's in our DNA that this is a belief, like you were talking about, having made a mistake in a past life, and this is your punishment, and this is right. So even if cognitively, I love what you said, even if I'm thinking that's not true, I feel like it's true, which is really important communication too for your body.
Absolutely. I'll share, if it's okay with you, I'll share an example of a woman who was born here, brought up here, white.
Perfect. Yes.
My white client. I don't know how else to differentiate that anymore. So one of her, she had quite a bit of infertility struggles in her life, and she lost her, first pregnancy. The baby was quite. It's not an early miscarriage. It went for a little bit, and then she ended up losing the child, which was so devastating.
Oh gosh.
Then one of the challenges that we worked through for her was the guilt that she was holding to, because she wanted, her husband really wants a child, right? Like I think her husband is really, really fond of having a child and becoming a father. And that kind of translated for her to, I love my husband. I lost my first child, and I don't know what's going to happen with my future treatments. I'm feeling so bad. I'm infertile. I'm feeling so bad. I'm feeling so guilty that I can't give what my husband wants, and that makes me a failure.
Yeah, right. I feel like that's cross-cultural for sure. I feel like a failure.
And another nuance to that was that with another client, she was, she really wanted a family. She was going through a lot of, challenges in her journey as well. But she started becoming more, skeptic about, or I'm doing IVF, and she comes from some rural parts of Iowa, and I'm having IVF cycles. Pradeepa, I'm not sure what the society around me is going to think, that my child is not conceived naturally. How my child is going to feel, or how my child will be treated when they grow up. That you're not conceived naturally by your parents. It's not a natural process. So there is that connotation as well, right? Like it doesn't matter where people are born and grew up. There are all these different aspects of expectations from society, self-inflicted, and things that we have heard and observed over time, that we take it upon and start feeling guilty or ashamed or beat ourselves up with those.
Yes. Oh gosh, so much so. And in fact, that segues beautifully into my next question for you, particularly, of course, within the context of the Indian culture. I'm wondering about how it has changed the way that you parent, especially having adopted, and what thoughts you can give around the Indian culture and, donor conceived children or adoption or ultimately living without children.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah. Um, I even used to worry, right? Like I had in my IVF cycles, I end up having donor cycles as well, like donor egg cycles as well.
Mhm.
But I was really skeptic initially about the donor cycle. Let me tell about before even going to my parents, I talk about my mindset here, right? Like my mindset was around like, okay, the child is not going to look like me because it's not going to have my DNA. The child is not going to, in my mind, I started creating all these different stories that I had a really hard time accepting that fact that it's not going to be mine, right? But then the thing that I really it really helped me move on was I expressed this concern to the doctor that I was seeing at the time, and he asked a simple question which really was an aha moment for you. Like, Pradeepa, I understand like it's not going to be the DNA, you're not going to be connected, but think about a child growing in your household, looking at you and your husband growing up, under your influence, under your love, under your care, right? What kind of mannerisms, or how would they resemble? And I said, like, yeah, they will pick all mine, right? Like all my mannerisms, they'll pick all the things that I do or I teach or how I am as a person,
Mhm.
right? And he said, like, there you go. What are you worried about?
Yep.
Right? And that was like 100 and 200, 500,000% correct. Because even though that's mathematically not possible, it was absolutely correct. Right? Because I see Kartik just like a mini me.
Yes.
If you can just close your eyes and pretend that it's a small boy speaking. He speaks like me, he uses words like me, his mannerisms are like me, right? And that was 100% true what the doctor said. It doesn't matter. It
Mhm.
does not matter, right? And even when going for my own adoption journey, trying to meet Kartik for the first time, I did not know what to expect. I had all these kind of feelings and stories like, what if Kartik doesn't come to me? What if Kartik
Yeah.
cries? If he sees me and runs away, what would I do? What would I do? What would I do? Right? I
Mhm.
was trying to find and create a plan for things that hasn't happened yet. It's all the stories that I
Yep.
made up, right? And I started feeling from those stories, which is not true right now. And when I saw Kartik for the first time, I know something that shared in my TED talk as well. Like I just like there's this overwhelming sense of something that came from inside that that just made everything possible for me at that moment. And I had a newfound confidence, like, you know what, I can do it, this is good, this is right, this
Mhm.
is what it's supposed to be. When I saw him for the first time, and more so when he walked over to me and sat on my lap for the first time, right? And he sat on my lap first before when we got introduced. And to me, you know what? Nothing else matters.
Mhm.
All the stupid stories and what if scenarios that I made up in my head, you know what? It all went away. Nothing matters. That the thing that mattered most was that moment.
Mhm.
Maria, I have never been present so much in my life,
Mhm.
right? I'll be super honest with you. That was the first time that I was so present at that point in life where I did not think about anything else.
Yeah.
right? So, you know, all in all, to say, people get it, right? People get it. People understand. People evolve and people mature. It doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter um, how people are going to take it or what they are going to say. To me, I always wanted to bring it back to us, like, what matters to you.
Yeah,
Once you figure that out, everything will fall into place.
it really does. It's hard to see that light, but that's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Helping
really,
to show the
really
light.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did your family respond?
Very welcoming. It was such a beautiful experience. Everybody welcomed Kartik with open arms. They love him, they adore him. It's there's there's no difference. That's what I meant to say. It doesn't feel any different. Nobody sees him as different. Nobody treats him as different. It doesn't look that way.
Mhm.
He's ours,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
That's
I
how everybody
even
treats.
I was going to ask you also about adopting interracially and how that would be seen in your country of origin. I have my two sons are from South Korea, and I mean, boy, and one of them was adopted. My youngest was adopted at 4,
Yeah.
and if he doesn't act exactly like my husband, I don't know. It's like he stands like him.
Yeah.
He uses words like I do too.
Yeah.
The other day I heard him go, "Oh crap."
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh my god, that's me."
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about interracial adoption for you
Yeah.
guys. I
It,
mean,
it,
Kartik is also
he's
of
Indian origin as well. Yes, he's Indian origin as well. That's how much we know about him. But to me, right, I don't have experience with interracial adoption, but this is how it comes to me, Maria. I'm going to literally translate a few lines of a song that I've heard a long time ago. I'll say that in my mother tongue and then I'll translate it for you, right? Like, எந்த குழந்தையும் நல்ல குழந்தைதான் மண்ணில் பிறக்கையிலே அது நல்லவராவதும் தீயவராவதும் அன்னை வளர்ப்பதிலே. Meaning, any child that's born in this world is a good child.
Oh,
Doesn't matter who they are and what they look like, right? And it's up to the parents to bring them as good citizens,
oh, how beautiful.
right? And that's something that I truly believe in, because that's the responsibility parents take on. That's the ownership that we take on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's up to us. It doesn't matter who
Yeah.
Kartik was born to or how he was conceived or how he looks, and doesn't matter. The
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is on us. And any child that is born in this world is as pure as the morning dew.
Oh, how beautiful. I'm getting chills. I love this. Well, my final question for you is around offering some hope and wisdom for folks that it sounds like you just did. This whole thing actually has been hope and wisdom. Any final thoughts, though? Any other nuggets of wisdom to offer people?
Yeah. Oftentimes, when people are going through the thick and thin of infertility, um, they think it's a very lonely journey. It is, I understand, right? It is very lonely. Even though you're surrounded with people, people who love, oftentimes, just because of the nature of this journey, uh, many people are not willing to open their heart and talk about it, or explore what's going on. What I would what I would advise people or suggest people is, don't struggle in silence, because there are professionals, there are people like you and I who can help the a journey, right? Like, in fact, I wrote a book called Infertility Can Suck Less, if I can show it. Or
Best
here,
title ever.
right? So, how to take control and ownership of your infertility struggles, because it can be a lonely journey, and it doesn't have to be. That's what I'm saying, right? irrespective of whatever the outcome is, right? Like irrespective of what the outcome, of course, everybody wants to have a child or a baby or babies as the outcome at the end of the journey, but not everybody, just scientifically speaking, not everybody is going to have that.
Right.
Doesn't mean that that doesn't mean you cannot go through a good journey.
Yes.
Journey can still be a good journey irrespective of what the outcome is, and that's exactly what I wanted to portray in my book, and I hope I portrayed that. um, because when we start getting so much attached to the outcome, so much focus on the end, we started living in the present and we forget how miserable we can make the present for ourselves. Trust me, I did that for myself.
Oh yeah. Oh
Right?
yeah.
I made it miserable for myself, all my doings, right? I'll take ownership of that. And it doesn't have to be that way. And that's exactly what I wanted to convey. Don't struggle in silence, right? Like even if you think that you have the worst journey going for, and it may be the case, it can still be doable.
Yes. And it can suck way less.
Yes. Yes.
So much less. Oh, yes. Okay, Pradeepa, can you hold up your book one more time?
Yes, ma'am.
And for listeners, it is called Infertility Can Suck Less. And again, best title ever. We will link to that on the show notes here. And what is your website?
So pradeepafertilitycoach.com.
Perfect. Obviously, we'll link to that too. And you must see Pradeepa's TED Talk if you want to cry and have some hope and some wisdom sent your way. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for your insights today, Pradeepa. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Maria. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much.